the privilege of having Kelly come and speak to us in our final talk this afternoon. Kelly is a church planter with her husband, Howard, and also works for the denomination that they are a part of. Kelly, would you come on up and take us away?
Okay. Hey, y'all. Happy Black History Month. It's so fun to be here and behind the pulpit, and I don't have to worry about nobody bringing me under charges or my husband or my church under charges because, PCA doesn't do that. Um, so this is very cool. Um, I also want to say thank you for having gluten-free bread. I don't know whose decision that was, but bless you. I can't do gluten, and so I saw sandwiches, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to do a meat and cheese roll up, and my fingers get all germy, and I don't like it. And I'm like, I'm probably not gonna be full, and so I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? And we got there, and we were in line with somebody, and I was like, they have gluten-free bread. Thank you, Lord. So sometimes it's the little things that matter. Um, I have a lot to talk to you guys about in a little bit of time, so I'm going to talk kind of fast. But if you have a question or something you want me to talk more about, please throw your hand up, and I will do my best to address that as much as I can. Um, I'm supposed to talk to you guys today about Black women and white church. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about myself and tell you who I am and how I get a chance to do just that. Um, again, my name is Kelly Brown, born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. That's been talked about a lot thus far. I have a bachelor's in fine arts from Valdosta State University. Oh, somebody who knows Valdosta, yeah, yeah! This is just my day. What is happening? Yep, most people are like, Val, what? Where's that? So yes, it's deep South Georgia, that's right. But I'm a Midwesterner, right? In Valdosta State, got a bachelor's in fine arts, specifically focusing in uh, television and film and theater. A little bit of radio was in there. I have a little bit of seminary also. I went to Covenant Seminary for a year because they let spouses go for free. And Howard and I were engaged, so they let me go, even though we weren't married yet. So I got a little bit of a master's in general theological studies under my belt. I have been in the PCA 29 years. I was in the PCA before I met my husband, so I have to make sure folks know I didn't marry in. He married in. So and I'm gonna tell you more about that, but it's been crazy to say I've been here 29 years. I work for African American Ministries, which is an agency under the Mission to North America. In the PCA, there are basically two branches: Mission to North America, Mission to the World. Obviously, the North American side really historically was more of a church planting. Then they went into all this other stuff over the years, and they're sort of revisiting their impact in church planting. But that was the main goal of them back in the day. And then, of course, Mission to the World was the missionary branch serving other countries for the gospel. So I work for M&A, and I've been there, March will be 3 years. And I basically run the organization. It's a nonprofit inside of a nonprofit. So I run that element of it, and I also get a chance to have direct connection and ministry to African American folks that come into the PCA that are struggling for a variety of reasons. It is not an easy place to be. And I have enjoyed that position. I'm also a church planter. Howard planted Christ Central Church, and if you're married, then that means that whomever you're married to also planted that church. Don't ever get that twisted, okay? A man cannot plant a church without his wife, without her support. And I was more than support. I was boots on the ground. I was strategizing. I was planning, creating what we thought this church should look and feel like, right alongside Howard and the guy who ended up being the co-planter. So I call myself a church planter. I'm also a church leader. So this is our, thank you. I was a woman shepherd at my church in Charlotte. And y'all know, or maybe you don't know, who's PCA in here? Okay, it's former, amen. Oops. So, yeah, man, it's a rough time, but we can't, they have subscribed to the idea that women cannot have certain roles of leadership in the church. They can't preach, and they can't pastor, and there are some churches that even believe a woman shouldn't hand out a bulletin. 2023. Can't even hand out a bulletin. There are even some churches in our denomination where a woman has to have her head covered. And when you go to GA, General Assembly, our National Assembly, you'll see some of those women walking around with a doily on their head, which is fascinating. So we have women shepherds at our church, and I was a woman shepherd. We were responsible for the global spiritual health of the church alongside the elders. So my husband was always pushing the boundary in our presbytery and always getting in trouble for doing stuff. And having women shepherds was one of them, because we were invited to the session meetings that happened once a month. In fact, they wouldn't have session meeting if the women shepherds weren't there. Now, we couldn't vote. Session meeting is the meeting of the leaders of the church, all the men folk who lead the church, called elders. And if we weren't there, they didn't meet. And we didn't have a vote. We couldn't vote technically. But those men listened to us and invited us in and required our input and expertise and support, not just for women in the church, but for the church in general. So I was one of those people. I also was the director of worship and arts at Christ Central for the last 7 years, leading the worship service, designing the worship service, and then leading music on Sunday morning. So I've done a lot. I'm the mom of two beautiful boys, Harrison and Clark. And I met a Harrison here today, so that's fun. Harrison will be 21 in March, which is crazy to me. And he is a freshman, a transfer freshman at SCAD in Savannah, studying fibers, which is, his arm of it is textiles and fashion, as opposed to textiles and science. We were just talking about that with somebody earlier. So he's doing well. And then my youngest, Clark, is at Morehouse College, which is the premier historically Black college and university. Our brother here is a graduate from Morehouse, which makes me super happy to see you, amen. There is not really a more prestigious HBCU you can go to than Morehouse, and that's where my youngest is. He was physics, applied physics, then he was music, now he's undeclared. I don't know what he's doing. He's Mr. Anti-Establishment, so I want him to love Morehouse, and all he does is pick everything apart. But that's him. One day God will use that for his glory some type of way. Anyhow, that's all I got. So we moved to Atlanta, Howard talked about, 6 months ago today, to plant a Black church after having done multi-ethnic church ministry for a very long time, 20 years in our denomination. And I realized that a lot of my story, my salvation story, is connected to race and culture. So the first thing I want to do is kind of share with you my testimony. Midwestern girl in deep South Georgia. I was in instant culture shock, okay? very black school. It's not a black school, but large percentage of black folks. And y'all, I say African American sometime, but I like black. It's faster to say. Just I don't need all the syllables in my life, so I just say black and white, okay? So I'm sorry if it offends you, my bad. It's really about speaking faster. So I'm there. My cousin, I kind of followed my two cousins who also lived in Valdosta. My one cousin was a captain in the Air Force, and my other cousin was the assistant director of housing for the university. And I just wanted to get out of St. Louis. I didn't want to be in the cold. Somebody said that earlier today. It's freezing, the snow. Never seen so much snow. I didn't want to ever see snow again in my whole life. And I wanted to get away from my mama. I just didn't, if I was too close, she was going to say, come home for the weekend. So I needed to be really far away. So that was never, ever an option. And I had family in Valdosta, so I went there. And I found myself a stranger in a strange land with people who looked just like me. And it was everything from the food they ate to the way that they spoke. And they called me. I get there and I'm in class, English class, and the professor says, you know, what was a transformative experience for you over the summer? And this young white woman who's my age raises her hand and says, has she had this experience where she helped save somebody's life and it told her she wanted to be a nurse. She didn't know what she wanted to be. And she goes on to tell this story, and she says, and he was a colored man too. And colored man? I thought, oh, she meant he was turning purple because he was choking. No, she meant he was black. And I'm like, you're my age. How in the world, where am I? Get me out of here. And so I go and I hang out with the black folks, and their tongue, their dialect was so southern thick, I couldn't understand what anybody was saying. And it just put a target on my back. So then they started calling me a Yankee. And I'm like, that's a baseball team. I like, what year are y'all in? Yankee? So it was really hard, and I could not connect. And I started going to church with my cousin, and she was having a very similar experience, trying to find a church. Now, we grew up Black Baptist for the most part. That was my last experience right before going to college, was a Baptist church. I told y'all earlier, we were non-denominational, Jehovah's Witness, Baptist. We were a lot of different things. I wasn't raised in a Christian home, and I would have told you I was a believer, but I wasn't. The Lord saved me well after I got into college. But I went to church with my cousin. She's having a hard time finding a church. It's just culturally different. It's just, they look like us, but it's just really different. So her coworker finally said to her, listen, why don't you come to my church until you can find a church? I've been helping you try to find one. Nothing's working out. You need fellowship. And my cousin was so ready to just be in an environment, a church environment, build community, that she said, okay. Now her friend said, I gotta tell you, it's an all-white church. There's nobody like you there. And I hesitated to invite you because I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. But I'm more concerned about you having somewhere to go. So if you're comfortable coming, I will sit by you and I invite you to come. So my cousin agrees. And she starts going to Westminster Presbyterian Church in Valdosta, Georgia. And I follow her. I start going too. And it was more culture shock, right? Except for this time, it was around the church. I had never been to a service like this. It blew my mind. I tried to connect, and it was really hard. The thing that blew my mind is every single Sunday, this thing starts right at 11, and it's over at 11:59, 58. How do they do that? How do they do that? Like clockwork. First of all, it's an hour, and it's never an hour and 1 minute. Never. Blew my mind. Then we get in there, and I grew up Black Baptist. We hand clapping, tambourine shaking, preachers sweating, 3-hour service, 80-person choir, folk running around the building, rocking, big black church, to a spot where nobody even says amen. I didn't know what to think of that. That was really hard for me. And they play these things called, what was the song selection? In the black church, we call it special music or selection A or selection B. Anthems. I said, what is an anthem? It's just a song that you sing before the sermon. All of these words and all these differences, whatever. I got used to it. But it was a lot for this 18-year-old kid to come in and have basically uncomfortability from people who looked like me and from people who didn't. So my cousin becomes good friends with 3 of the ladies in the church. And I want to tell you about my cousin because this is important, and it may make some of you all uncomfortable, but you got to understand where I'm coming from. My cousin is a single mom. Her husband is incarcerated, of 4 children. She is a heavy-set, tall, dark-skinned woman. She's beautiful, but she looks, in my head, stereotypical. So she's going to this white church, and she's making friends with these white women, and I'm looking at her going, they're just going to make you a token. You're just going to be a case to them. You don't have a husband. You don't have a high-powered job. You live in an apartment. They're never going to view you as an equal. And I watched her with these women. One woman's husband was the chief of surgery at the local hospital. Another woman's husband was the chief of radiology at the hospital. The other woman's husband had the top position at one of the major industries for the city. So these are the wives of very affluent, powerful people in this small community. And then there's my cousin. And so I would watch. I'd go over to her house, and they'd be having Bible study. The first thing that struck me is that they went to her home, because I'm thinking that's not usually what privileged white folks do. They don't usually go and sit in and settle in and fellowship inside somebody's house who's so very different from them. And I would sit there and watch them and listen, and these women are just laughing and crying and just having the best time in Jesus, reading scripture, and it's just captivating them. I was intrigued by that because most Bible studies I'd seen with folks, it was pretty static. Like everybody just sort of sits there and takes notes, and nobody really gets engaged around these things about the gospel. And yet I'm watching these women do this, and my cousin's a part of this. And then here's the thing. These women began to share with my cousin the dark, hurtful, painful places of their lives. They were humble enough to be transparent about their need for Jesus. With this woman who doesn't look like them and who didn't seem to have any of those quite the same issues, and I watched my cousin pour into them. She ministered to them, and they received it. I didn't know that's what Christianity could look like. I didn't know it was sharing your life, and people who, in my experience with white folks in St. Louis, was the last thing you do is tell people all your issues and struggles. You just don't do it. And then in the South, you really don't do it. You keep your business to yourself. So I'm watching these women need Jesus so deeply. And when I tell you, these were not issues of marriage or hardships with kids. This was mental health breaks. One of the women had a whole psychotic episode in the hospital where her husband's the chief of whatever on the third floor. They have to come and get her and put her in a straitjacket and take her to the seventh floor. I don't know, in small town hospitals, the seventh floor is like that. That's the ominous floor, right? Something crazy is happening on the seventh. You don't want to go to the seventh floor. We're talking about women revealing just insidious sexual abuse by a brother, and her parents knew. And now she's suffering with all kind of mental health issues and OCD. I didn't know white folks talked about their problems like that. I wasn't even sure white folks had problems like that. And here they are pouring their hearts out in the presence of my cousin, and she's ministering to them, and they are ministering to her. If that's what the gospel looks like, sign me up. I had no idea. That relationship, watching those relationships, really is what the Lord used to draw me to himself. I would have told you I was a Christian, and through that ministry of my cousin herself, who is my spiritual mom in many, many ways, and watching her relationship with these women, and then hearing the gospel at this white man's church for that 20-minute sermon every Sunday. And the Lord, a series, that's a whole nother thing, how the actual day the Lord revealed himself to me. I don't like to say I got saved. I didn't do anything. I like to say the day the Lord revealed his hand on my life to me. But all of that is what changed me. And I didn't know it at the time, as my cousin and I being the only black people in this very affluent white church in the Deep South. I didn't know what it would become as the years went by, but it was critical to my understanding of faith and what gospel looks like. And now it's what God has used to show me to be able to teach and talk about multi-ethnic and racial issues in the church. So, okay, I got a new thingy here. Y'all know the Remarkable? Anybody ever heard about Remarkable? Yeah, I just got one. Yeah. I got it as we were walking out the door to come here. So, right? I'm like, a gadget, yes. All right, so I want to talk more about this, but I want to tell you there's some goals here, what this talk is and what it isn't. What I hope that it is for you all is a chance to hear firsthand from a black woman in a PWI church, predominantly white institution is what PWI is. And then I hope that it's a chance for you all to hear some of my, let's see, that's the other problem. You got to read your handwriting. Yeah, to hear some of what I've gone through to maybe help you guys better understand what it feels like for a black woman to come into a white space. And then a chance to ask questions in a safe space. And that safe space part is important. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But what this isn't, right, is an exhaustive guide for relating to and understanding black folks or black women. That's not what I can do for you guys in an hour. It is also it isn't permission to use what I'm going to share with you guys today as a way to convince black folks that you're worthy to be trusted. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think that is one of the greatest fears that black folks have about being in multi-ethnic situations, is that I'm going to share my stuff and then you're going to use it against me. So that's why this isn't permission to do that. And then the last thing this isn't is, well, I wrote a debate because I wasn't sure what kind of audience y'all were. Understand, People ask for these talks, but a lot of times they're not ready for it once it's said. And so often I've shared, my husband shared, and then we end up trying to convince the people we shared with of the very experiences that we had. Hearing you guys last night, I realized I don't have to say that to y'all. I don't think you guys are going to debate me. You guys seem like folks who've already done some work and who are already willing, and you will believe me. You won't make me defend my experience so you can feel more comfortable with it. So I don't think I have to say that it's not a debate. You guys want to be a multi-ethnic church. Howard's talked a lot about that already in the reformer, the reconciler, the reacher. Whatever you guys decide to be, I just want to give you some of what I've experienced to try to help you guys navigate when a Black woman, particularly a Black woman, walks through your door, if this is where you guys reside or if you're at a church that's looking to be multi-ethnic. Very often, Black women end up being the solo Black person in XYZ white church. Black men do come a lot of times, but overwhelmingly it's Black women that we see across denominations that are one of no more than 5 in a fellowship that could be as small as 100 or as big as 2,000. So the likelihood that a Black woman would find you guys one day and decide to fellowship here, I think is pretty high. If Christ the Redeemer seeks to become a multi-ethnic church, the treatment of Black women in particular will be critical. One reason is because, I would say collectively, because we've experienced so much turmoil and we recognize divisions from a distance. The way you guys treat each other will be just as critical as to how you treat her. So if you guys have isms and schisms amongst yourself, she's gonna pick up on that. And it's gonna make her feel more unsafe. Quick example, Christ Central started in the Arts District of Charlotte with 30 white families in an area that was called the Arts District. It basically meant that you liked to paint and didn't wash very often. It was grunge city, right? So white folks we got all white, not only Black folks there, and you've got these corporate Bank of America types in khakis and a golf shirt, and you've got folks whose hair's down to their shoulders with no shoes on, and they literally haven't washed. It's just not a value for them. We started at whatever time, I think it was 10 o'clock. We were often running a little late, so we'd start 10:07, 10:05. The corporate types live it every Sunday. We didn't start till 10:02. What's going on? This ship needs to tighten up. To, the guy who wants to do live art while Howard's preaching, saying, we're so glad that you guys are not all hung up on time and all driven by the status quo, like we've never been to a church like that. This is great. Well, those two people couldn't stand one another. And here Howard and I are in the middle, trying to get them to love your neighbor. Forget Black folk, y'all don't like each other. We can't bring Black folks here. Y'all gotta find a way to look at each other and see value and the image of God and not cram your cultures down each other's throats before we can start having anybody who looks different come through here. So that was a really interesting situation, but you have to be a church that I was gonna say Black women and Black people, we sort of sniff that out from a distance, right? Because the last place we wanna be is somewhere where there's already strife. It's gonna be hard enough to walk in here and be myself. If I walk into a room where the room is split, I'm gonna get pulled even harder or ignored that much more. So that's important. I have 3 struggles that I would say every black woman, many black women, I can't say every, but many of the black women that I know and myself that I struggled with in a predominantly white space. The first one is an issue of beauty. Our denomination has an annual conference called LDR, and it is a gathering of all the African American folks across the denomination. And every year we would have a breakout with just black women, where a panel of black women, older black women, and women who were in ministry in some way were ministering to younger black women in the room. Every year, y'all, every year. These women, again, many of them were the only black folks in their church, were devastated and crushed because they realized that they were not seen for their beauty at all. And certain things about their beauty was viewed as negative. A young woman with a large afro, beautiful afro. If any of y'all are from the 60s and 70s, you know how valuable an afro was then, right? We don't necessarily have that anymore, but she had beautiful natural hair. Told the story, she's sitting in church and a man tapped her from behind and asked her to move because he couldn't see. And being told things like the same outfit as what the other young women were wearing, she would get comments about maybe your clothes are too tight. Well, our bodies are different. I don't know if you noticed, but black women are built differently than white women, and Latina women are built differently than both of those. These are things that God did. We can't regulate them. They reflect His beauty and glory. But if you push people to look like you, you're going to run into a deep offense, because she was just wearing what everybody else was wearing, but it looked differently on her. And the idea that someone would tell her, hey, we think you're inappropriately dressed. Now, y'all, I'm telling you, if somebody comes in skin-tight clothes, I mean, we obviously know there's a difference between the church and the club, right? That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about regular clothes. But our hips and our backsides fill out a pair of pants a little differently. Some of us, I've gained a lot of weight over the years, and I can tell you firsthand, things don't fit quite the way that they did. But that was assigned to her as the only black woman in the space, and it just crushed her. There is this idea that if you go to a white church, who will find, and you're single, who will see your beauty and want to date you? If she wants to date interracially, first of all, and she may not, but there are just so many. Covenant College, we have friends whose children have gone to Covenant College, and a good friend of ours has 4 daughters. All 4 of them went there, and they were just constantly overlooked. Anytime there was a dance or something where you needed a date, the black guys would go with white girls, and all the white guys went with white girls, and they literally had no one. And so there is this real sense, and you could probably question and say, oh, that's kind of shallow, until you're on the other side of it, when you're just invisible. And things that you think are beautiful about you that God gave you, you're constantly trying to tell yourself is okay, when everybody around you either doesn't see you or sees it as a problem. And that is just, it's a hard place to be in. And I'm going to tell you this preciously, because it could be mishandled with the best intentions. But as you see black women moving around in spaces, and I'm going to say us women in general, we don't always get taught to compliment other women. We don't always get told to see the beauty in other women image bearers, right? So the first thing I'd love to tell you is y'all in this fellowship, y'all need to look at each other and say, oh, you look pretty today. You got your hair cut, it looks good on you. God makes beautiful things, amen? You reflect his beauty, right? So black women and black folks want you to walk in your beauty so you can help us walk in ours, right? But as you see black women come around, it's important to say things to them where they feel seen. And I'm talking women to women here. Affirm them. And I'm not talking about saying things that just to be gushy and, oh my God, that's too much too. Like, don't overwhelm, don't accost, but begin to look at one another and say, greet each other, hello, gorgeous. We teach that to our little girls, and somewhere along the way, we decide we shouldn't do that anymore. But what if we did, right? What if that was the natural environment of this church so that when black people came, you weren't creating something just because they were there, right? You want to be multi-ethnic? Start doing this with one another. I don't know what men folk do. I mean, I don't know how y'all compliment one another unless it's like fishing or cars or something. I don't know. I don't really hear like white dudes say, you look good today, unless it's like a wedding or a funeral or something like that. I don't know. But think about it, right? Black men compliment each other. Black men look at each other, and there's this whole language around, all right, Doc, all right, I see you. So they don't necessarily say, hey, you look good today. They say, I see you, man, all right. That's affirming, right? And black women, too, don't always say, hey, you look good in stripes today. They'll just say, okay, stripes. Okay, stripes. That means you look good, girl, right? So black people do that for one another, and maybe it is shallow, but there's something there to investigate. And the idea of beauty and being affirmed and then finding partnership with a fellow believer, you feel completely unseen a lot of times. So just consider that. Then there's the issue of safety. And I don't mean physical safety, I mean emotional safety. We talked about this a little earlier. Somebody did. I can't remember if it was Otis or Howard, but the issues of trust when you go into a space where no one looks like you, you automatically wonder if you will be seen and if you will be valued as an image bearer, right? And so there's always this question of, am I safe? Are these people safe? Will they believe me? Will they listen to me? Will they, like my cousin, will they allow me to speak into their lives, or do they think that they can only speak into mine? Can I trust them? Will they trust me? Those are issues of safety, and that is developed by relationship. And I want to tell you, the day you start getting somebody black to come through your door, that's going to have to be built. It doesn't happen quickly. Even showing up at a white church in Valdosta, Georgia, I knew that these people were Christians, but I wasn't sure how their Christianity was going to apply to me. I wasn't even sure they'd ever been around a young black woman before. And it was only by watching my cousin's relationships that I decided that these people they're not out to hurt me. And by having my own relationships in that church where I began to just get to know folks and let them get to know me and build trust. Multi-ethnicity is not built in a day. I would even tell you, like my cousin, she had a relationship with the lady that invited her for months before she even said, hey. And her sense of inviting her to the church was out of care. It was not out of trying to be multi-ethnic. So just remember that. And when you're wondering if you're in a space that is safe, you want to be seen and affirmed, but you also don't want to become someone's someone's token, right? You don't want to have the feeling that you're only here and people are excited about you because you make our church multi-ethnic. Your church won't be multi-ethnic until you've got a good percentage and balance. You may have black folks coming, and I'm going to say multi-ethnicity is not the same thing as and I like to say cross-cultural church, right? Because culture matters too. But it doesn't, you need a lot more than one or two black people to say you're a multi-ethnic church. Happens all the time. The one or two black folks they have all over the website. Every frame. And then you go to the church and it's like, oh, that was literally it. There's nobody else. So just understanding that and creating relationships with people, meeting them where they are and building those friendships kind of almost despite the church. You know what I'm saying? That matters. And I think that's how you build real connection to and safety for black people in a multi-ethnic or in a predominantly white space. And then there's this last issue of issues of being trusted. This one is also complex because here's what happens. Black folks show up in an environment and the white folks get really excited about them. And, you know, if they're not all over the website, they get asked to do everything in the church, right? Or they get asked to do things that they're not equipped for or want to do. This ends up disastrous, y'all. We have seen so many times where somebody was asked to come in and lead a ministry. They had never led a ministry before. They are still wrestling with feeling like they're really a part of the church, the fellowship of the church, and they don't do well in that position. Or it's going so poorly, but nobody wants to say, hey, we think we need you not to do this because they don't want to seem racist. Y'all, this has hurt a lot of folks. This has hurt a lot of people. And it's hurt a lot of fellowships because now the church is trying to deal with something that nobody ever wanted, right? So you gotta make sure if you're gonna have black folks, you gotta ask them what they want to do and what they like and are equipped to do. So if I come in and my thing is music, but y'all have somebody doing music and music is going great, you know, or your musician leaves and you say, hey, Kelly, do you want to do music? Well, I can do music. I fit. Children's ministry, I'm not your girl. Don't do that to me. Now, you know, and if I don't have the good sense to say, nope, I can't do that, and I get signed up to do the children's ministry because you want to make sure that this black person feels like they're a part of your fellowship, and then it goes to the toilet, then, you know, everybody's feeling awkward, right? You wouldn't do that with somebody white, right? So just be careful. Then the other thing that happens is always being asked to be front and center to make the church feel better about itself. You can't do that either. I'm going to tell you, you're going to have all types of black folks come through your door, right? Some people just want to sit and watch. They want you to speak to them. They want you to love on them, but they don't want you to ask them to do anything. They will tell you when they're ready to step forward. They'll join the church. They'll sign up for a ministry. They will initiate it. But I have seen time and time again, let's get them up here because we're striving to be multi-ethnic, and that person is not ready to carry that. That is a lot to carry. That is a heavy burden to be the image of what the church is striving for, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Another thing that happens is fighting to be heard and seen as an equal while being pushed to assimilate. I don't know why we are often so uncomfortable, and this isn't just white folks, really happens with men and women. Like a lot of what you understand about race and culture and black folks and white folks or whomever, just think about marriage. As hard as it is to understand, these two, this man, this woman, wildly different, right? It's a lot of the same parallels. If you think about yourself as a husband trying to relate to your wife, and she's the strangest person you've ever met, she does all kind of things and thinks things that you're like, how in the world did you get to that? And she's looking at you to say, welcome. That's the same thing with race. Can I get an amen? Y'all understand what I'm saying? It's really not that abstract. So as you have black folks that come in, you have to be able to meet them in whatever they present and not push them to assimilate to the culture that you are. What are you talking about, Kelly? Well, again, the young woman with the natural hair, don't ask her to move. Don't stare at her hair. Don't ask to touch it like you're on safari. If you're curious, build relationship first. Don't ask her a million questions about her hair or her clothes or her jewelry or her makeup. Build relationships first. See her as a person first, okay? Allow her to be her ethnic, cultural self. This has been my greatest struggle in the PCA because I'm a woman. That's the first hit against me. I'm a black woman. That's just doubled down. And I'm a leader. I'm a talker. I'm not afraid to use my voice. 3 strikes, I'm out. I make white men extremely uncomfortable. But I've been here 29 years. And I go to General Assembly, and I wear my Afrocentric shirts, and I wear my African earrings, and I put my hair up. I'm not going to water down who I am so that these people will accept me, right? Howard talked a little bit about code switching earlier. I think everybody code switches. Everybody code switches. If first time you met your spouse's parent, I guarantee you code switched. You had to, because you wanted to present your best self and make these other people receive you in the best light, right? I know Otis code switches because we were talking to him on the phone in the car, and I was like, where, you got up here? I'm like, what happened to Otis's deep Southern accent? Wow, it's gone right now. But when he was talking to Howard, when he was comfortable and relaxed and familiar, a different accent came out. Howard did the same thing. I code switch. Women code switch for other women. It's just part of how you get along in the world. But for somebody black to come in and be able to not have to code switch in front of you is one way you'll know that they are feeling comfortable. You've made them feel comfortable, right? And so I have often changed the way that I speak. I have often changed the tone of my voice because I had somebody white tell me that my voice was too difficult for people to hear. I have been very careful oftentimes about what I wore. I was an Oreo. We talked about that earlier. I did not want to present black as much as possible so white folks could accept me. And then the Lord said, but that's not who I made you. And I couldn't stand the black church. And then I went into new members class at Westminster, and I'm hearing all of this theology, and I'm like, gosh, I know this. I've heard this before. And the Lord said, you heard it from me in the black church, but you decided that the black church was insignificant. Now I say that if the PCA is my father, the black church is my mother. Now I can value it. Now I can go to GA as myself, and I have some good brothers, white brothers who have known me, and when I see them, they aren't perplexed by me. I can walk up to Otis and he doesn't stare at my shirt like, oh gosh, she's got one of those pro-black shirts on. He doesn't do that. And I don't stare at his bow tie. No, exactly. That's a great point. So, if you're fighting to be heard and resist being assimilated to make people comfortable, then they're not going to feel comfortable in your church long term. And they may come, they may stay a really long time. And here's what'll happen. So another George Floyd, God forbid, another crazy election cycle, another pandemic of proportions that are impacting Black folks, and things will come out and that person will begin to feel unsafe again. So just be careful. Just be thoughtful of those particular things. Issues of beauty, issues of safety, and issues of being trusted. I don't know where I am on time. How am I doing? Okay. Oh, that's the wrong little page. Here it is. Okay. We talk about racial reconciliation being the goal of a multi-ethnic church. Okay. I actually think, and Howard and I believe, that racial reconciliation can look like that, but it's not exclusively like that. We actually think, particularly in the PCA, I can't speak to the Anglican Church because I don't know that much about it, but we need to have stronger Black churches. We need to have more Black churches in order for racial reconciliation to work, right? Mr. Hassan said, or maybe as Pastor Luke said, that in order for racial reconciliation to happen, the first thing you have to do is remember. I agree with that. But I also think after you're done remembering, you have to restore. You have to restore. And a lot has been taken away from the way Black folks feel like the church has demanded their image to be. So we got to restore that. For my white men in the room, this is just some practical stuff. See all women. I'm going to hope that y'all are not the oppressive PCA. I'm not leaving. I think I'm called to be there. But I'll tell you, when I go to GA, I have never been so unseen. It is the most unsafe place ever. 3,000, I think, was the last General Assembly of 99% white men in the room. And literally, when you go onto the floor of GA, women can't go past a certain point. It's all men. It's all men. You can come as a visitor from here back, but from here forward, because those are the folks that vote. And when I tell you I've walked around these spaces, not even greeted, not even the decency and kindness of the Lord. Hello, a smile, or not, they just don't see me. This past GA, I went with, this past GA, I went without Howard. Now, I like the polity and all the governing stuff of the PCA. I'm kind of a nerd that way. I like Robert's Rules of Order. All that stuff's interesting to me. I'll watch C-SPAN and town council meetings of towns. Like, that's all. I'm a nerd that way. So I often go down to the floor to see what's going on because I also want to hear what's happening. When I'm with Howard, people will greet me. They'll look at me briefly. They know my name, they know his name, and then they can pull up my name. When I went without him, boy, they were scrambling. They would just stare at me. And I'm like, yeah, I know you. I know your name. Your name is so-and-so. And they're like, yeah, and I'm Howard's wife. Oh, gosh, yes, right? So men, see all women. See all of them. It's a big job, but you can do it. See all women, or at least be honest when you have a woman in front of you, you don't know her name or you're not sure. Don't just look past her, right? See Black women when you're at the store, when you're going to Target. See Black women. Look them in their eye. Smile and greet them. Good evening. Good afternoon. have a good night. Just be kind. Just be like Jesus. See who God has put you around. Let your face reflect that you see somebody. Empower them. White men, y'all hold the power. I don't know if that's ever going to change. When you're in your business meetings, when you're in your church meetings, when you're in your school PTA meetings, and you've got black folks in the room, for a white man or woman to look over at a black parent and say, hey, tell me what you think. Because they're either, oftentimes they don't want to say anything, or they don't feel free to say it. So when a white man looks at me and says, Kelly, what do you think? You fed my soul. Empower them. It's really not even empowerment. It's just bringing them to the table, right? Those things matter. I'm going to say, well, I'll say that later. For white women, I'm going to say be careful, right? I feel like a lot of times white women and black women have so much potential for connection in a lot of ways because as women, we know what it's like to be unseen, not believed, second place. We understand a lot of those issues. We heard a lot of that stuff, especially this last election, and the way you view women's bodies and human sexuality when it comes to women. So I think we're all carrying this burden of, I need for you to not take my dignity away. One of the things I've experienced as a black woman in white spaces is a lot of times some white women are just so happy to see me. They're just, there's a black lady at church today. And I'm like, wait, it's too much. Give me some space. Now, how do you balance that with actually, giving somebody space, but also affirming them? Yeah, I know. I don't know. It's going to be rough. I know what I'm saying. It's a both and. But oftentimes I feel like I am now responsible for being friends with all of the white women in the room, and I can't do that. I can't do that. When we first got to Christ Central, there was a lady there. She had adopted black children, and I think she thought she had a particular understanding about black folks. And she just, every time I turned around, she was right there, y'all. I'm not talking about like she was just friendly. It got creepy. Anytime we went somewhere, I had a birthday celebration, she insisted she sit next to me. I really don't know anybody here. I'm getting to know everybody. She insisted to do everything for me. Now, we were not friends. Again, we didn't build any relationship. It was just automatic. And she kept saying, I'm so happy y'all are here. I'm so excited about this multi-ethnic church. I was getting in my car one day, and she's like carrying my purse. And I'm like about ready to say, lady, get away from me. Give me some space. And she says, we're going to be, what is it? I know we're going to be soulmates. I want to be your anchor bearer. And I'm like, what? What does that mean? I really don't know this lady. She had the best intentions, but the worst results. When I tell y'all, I did everything I could to stay away from her. And I wanted to just tell her, hey, listen, this is too much for me right now. Like, we can be friends, we can hang out, like we can have a scheduled time, but you don't have to run and come get my purse. Like, that's too much. This is abnormal. Like, we don't even do this. This is PCA. Stop that. But sometimes it can be overwhelming. I was already overwhelmed being in the space. And this was as a leader, right? So just be careful. Every black woman that comes through the door, and this sounds hard, and I want you to hear it from me because I don't mean to say it ugly, but I think if you don't say it, I've done you a disservice. But every black woman that comes through the door doesn't want to be your friend. She just may be coming to church to hear the gospel. Be careful not to insert yourself, because here's the thing. Like I said, this lady, I didn't want to tell her, hey, that's too much, because now I'm feeling like I'm the like I am the multi-ethnicity of this church. I'm supposed to think this is great, and I didn't want her to feel rejected, and I didn't want to be called racist either. So you see how messy it gets. So just be careful not to insert yourself into places that she hasn't welcomed you into. And if she puts up a boundary and says no, I'm going to encourage you to not take it personally. To understand she's dealing with a layer of something that maybe you don't know anything about, okay? And here's the last thing. She's the black lady in the church. Maybe you got a bunch of black ladies, and the black guy walks in. Y'all don't match make. Leave him alone. Just leave him be. Howard talks about a covenant. It was he and Anthony. There were two black PCA, two black students, two black men and two black women. My cousin was one, Howard was one, Anthony Bradley and another lady. Well, not only did they constantly get Howard and Anthony confused, and they look nothing alike, but they were constantly trying to set Howard and Anthony up with this other woman. Just let folk be. Don't do that. I know it's tempting because you want to see folks happy, or you think, I'm not going to force you to have to date somebody outside of your race unless you want to. So, hey, here's a black guy. Have you met Kelly? That is super uncomfortable, and they will stop showing up to church because they don't want to do that. Okay? I know it's tempting. Just let folks alone. Honestly, we don't do that when single white guys come in the room to all those single white women, right? So sometimes you have to say, would I do this for somebody white? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Ooh. Stop it. Leave folk alone. Yes. That's funny. Okay, maybe y'all do that, but just, maybe we need to reevaluate that. Because I can tell you, single people, black, white, or whatever, when they get amongst themselves, they're like, oh my God, did you see how she keeps trying to put us together? So, but there's a lot to glean. And I wanted to say a safe space, like this is the time for you guys to ask. I don't mind you guys asking me questions, right? You may have another black friend or somebody black that shows up to the church. They may not be that person. I signed up for this. So one of the phenomena that happen at Christ Central all the time is just because of who I am, just my personality, and because I'm married to leadership, and because I'm a church planner, and because I'm over worship, you know, white folks would ask me questions. My friends, my black friends at church would be like, don't, like, stop before you eat. I'm not Kelly. I don't want to deal with all that. Y'all go ask her. You can't assume that everybody wants to have these conversations, right? And you can ask me, you can email me, I'll talk to you on the phone, but unless you know somebody really well or they've given you permission to ask them questions about race and culture, don't do it. Don't do it unless they invite you in. So that's what I have for you. I hope it's helpful. I hope it's encouraging. I could tell you that this is my perspective. There are black women who are in predominantly white spaces who might have a whole different set of things to say or even push back on some of the things that I've said. But all I can talk about is my experience and what I've seen. So as you guys seek to decide if you're going to be multi-ethnic, just consider some of that. Or even if you partner with a black church and just start building relationships with spiritual peers, that some of this may prove to be super helpful. So, any questions? Yes, sir. Ooh. It really is. Um, being poor or not being in the same socioeconomic status as the people around you can be exceedingly shameful. Um, there's a lot to say there. So I think that, again, it is people, anybody poor wants to know that you see them and you affirm them as an image bearer. Um, I've had a lot of white people start telling stories about when they were poor and whatever, and it's just like that. Don't do that because they can look at you and think, well, you're not poor now, and I'm still poor. Like, it does. You're trying to relate, but it went actually the opposite direction. So, I mean, I don't know. Again, I think people come in a lot of different packages and a lot of different sentiments, but overall, when my cousin was interacting with these women, it was because they saw her as a peer, regardless of how she looked or whether they were in an apartment or whether she was a single mom or a black woman or any of that. They handled her like a peer, like a true sister. And I think if you can keep that at the forefront of how you deal with anybody, you're going to always be in the right space. And even for somebody who is still uncomfortable, it may not be because you did anything wrong. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So I used to teach. I started teaching in '99 and have been in and out of the classroom since 1999. Kindergarten through post-high school theater. Um, and I've watched teachers struggle with that very issue. Um, that's a hard one. Um, what grade is it? So there's a certain point where anybody who's trying to get control of a room, they're going to throw anything at you, right? Just because they don't like what you're doing. I don't know if you were being racist or not. I'm assuming not overtly racist, because I think everybody's a little bit racist. Everybody, if you're sinful, you're gonna be racist, because God didn't say all the sin and racism. No, it's in there. So I don't know. Yeah, you were gonna say something. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't make sense. Listen, man, if you teaching is, they say crazy things to you and they accuse you of stuff that you didn't do. And I've also seen teachers be very overtly racist to students at the same time. And I've been angry at my black students for acting so stupid that I wanted to be racist against them too. Like, it's a complicated situation. I wish I could just say something quick to deal with that, but I think if you have a student who's saying that you're being racist, the last thing you can do is argue with them. I mean, they're really just baiting you to get out of whatever it is you're asking them to do. Young black women tend to be very angry and, what is the word? Afraid. So beneath that anger is hurt and pain, right? And I'll tell you that. So that's one thing. A lot of that angstness, besides it just being teenage angst, they don't know what to do with a white man because everything bad that's happened to them has come from a white man some way, shape, or form. I mean, Otis had that that law, right? So every black woman that you've seen has that in her DNA, that her children, and she had done something wrong by being raped and sexually assaulted, right? That's what it says. Whether or not she's in touch with that, I don't know, but they're going to use things against you. I have to tell you, you can't be afraid. You can't be afraid. And, high schoolers, I don't know. Sometimes you just have to say, well, I'm not being racist, but I do think here's something. Are you making your mother proud? What about your grandparents? I think they think you have more potential than what you have right now, too. Because you want to move her out of this idea of fight against a white man to, oh, maybe I am doing something that even my own people would look at me and say, what are you doing? Pray a lot. Yeah, I don't teach anymore. I don't teach anymore. I can't do it. And I'm black, so I'm like, girl, let me tell you something. Now I'm going to be the black mama, and I'm like, I can't do that either. But they come up with stuff. Teenagers are a trip. I taught middle school most of the time. And they have softer hearts, right? You can get after their heart a little better because they don't really think they're quite grown yet. High schoolers think they're grown. They think they're as old as you. And I can't, I'm too old school for that. I can't cope with that. But God bless you, man. Pray, anoint your room with oil, ask the Holy Ghost to cover your space, and keep going if you can. Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. They're baiting you. Yep. They're baiting you. Yeah. Why are you doing that? To yourself. Woo! You talk about choosing the stony path. Well, if y'all don't have any more questions, I really deeply appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I very often am not asked to talk, and there's a whole lot more I could talk about besides black people or black women. But I just am thankful for the hearts of this body and your leadership that just feels different to me, and just you all's willingness to listen and interact with me and my husband today and yesterday is just tremendous, and I'm grateful. Thank you.